In this session, we're going to be talking about choosing a pattern or a project to work on. And when we do that, we need to look at the pattern in several different places and in several different ways. And when I walk into a quilt store, I don't know about you, but I'm overwhelmed by how much fabric is often there and where do I start? So I start with the pattern, because if I know at least what I'm going to do, I have a better shot of finding the fabrics that I need. So I've gone into the quilt store, I have looked at all the patterns, and I have made a decision that I want to do one or the other of these patterns. Both very different. They're my designs called Divine Quilts, and this one is very modern, very fun. This one can be either modern, traditional. I made it with batiks, a line of batiks that I really love for fall. Very open. So the first thing that I need to do is really turn my pattern over and say, what kind of amounts of materials do I need in this? Often, and I find myself doing the same thing with my own patterns, I don't put enough information there because I may have used pre-cuts, I may have used yardage, different things. So let's take a look back at the front of the pattern. I want to take a good look at each individual block and say, what did they do to put that together and what drew me to this pattern? In this pattern, what drew me was all the bright colors, and it's just fun. So number one, I want to go find the fun fabrics, and I want those rings or squares, and I want that square and a square to show up because that's what drew me to this pattern. So I need to know how many lights, how many darks, and anything in between that I need. Now I can go and search for the fabrics and the amounts that are given in this particular pattern. But now I look at this pattern and I may decide that when I open it up and read the directions that I have an easier or a better way for me to do this same block, this same pattern. So I look at the front of my pattern and I look at these friendship stars and I say, did they make them the way that I make them? If not, I need to make sure that when I'm choosing my fabrics and buying the amounts, that I buy the amount that I need for my method of making that particular block. Same thing goes with the 8-pointed star. I may look at this pattern and say, you know, I really don't like the way she stopped and didn't finish off the sides. I want to add a little bit more to those sides and make my border differently. So then I have to buy fabric differently for that. So when I turn it over, read what's on the back, I'm going to make those adjustments in my pattern. So again, it is all about the details when I read a pattern and I go to buy my fabric, and then it doesn't become quite so overwhelming to me. All right, I have chosen my pattern. I am ready to buy my fabric, and I'm headed to the fabric bolts in the quilt store. So now what do? I need to talk about value and what I need to make my pattern sing. So I want to talk a little bit about preference, because color is preference. Most of us are gravitated to a color. We don't like green, but we love blue. We don't like red, but we love yellow. So we go to those colors and start to pick things out, and we think we have to be very matchy-matchy in our choices. So I have a series of red fabrics here because I want to make a red quilt. But when I lay those fabrics out, each fabric on its own is unique, beautiful. I love the colors, but now I've made my quilt and there's something wrong. It just doesn't do a thing for me. So I want to talk a little bit about the character of print on the fabric. How big it is, if it has swirls, geometric shapes, if it's small prints on there, or they're large blooms of flowers or large prints of character. So let's take a look at this pile of red that I have here, and how can we jazz this up to make it happier. I will often find what I call a connecting fabric or a bridge fabric, and it's still all in the red family, but it has some other shades and variations of color. So I stick that in there, and all of a sudden I'm starting to get a little bit of interest in that, and I'll put, so now I have some pinkish color, some orange. So I can add another fabric into my pile, and all of a sudden things are starting to change. Now I'm getting some little bit of swirl, a little bit of activity in my print, and I'm going to go really wild on you here. I'm going to throw that in, and all of a sudden it's starting to pop. And I'm going to keep adding a little bit of those brighter colors and different shades of red, different shades of fabrics, and all of a sudden I've got a quilt that I'm really more in love with than I was to start with. And here again is another one of those. I have my oranges, my deep reds, I have my lighter reds, and I have it, and this makes me happy. This makes it sing. Let me show you one other example. I have a fabric here that I really like, and I want to do a neutral quilt. So I found this fabric, and I noticed that it has white, it has tans, it has grays, it has golds, it has even a shade of gray that looks a little blue. So I have a lot of places I can go with this. So when I'm looking at neutrals, I go and find my neutrals and I bring them all out. I lay those fabrics that I've chosen out, and I look at it with my fabric and I'm going, it's okay, but there's something missing here. And I look at this connecting fabric and I say, what's here that's not here? And I don't see a lot of white, I don't see a lot of bright, and I don't see the gray. So once I bring in some of those fabrics and I throw them into the mix, it doesn't take very long for you to see just what those bright, happier fabrics and different colors and different character of prints, large, small, gray. Here I have that gray with just a little bit of blue in it. Here I'm going to change the geometric shapes that are on there, and that gives me an extra punch in that mix. And so now when I look at my fabric, it makes me smile. Don't forget to look to fabric itself beyond all the other things that you're using. I find a fabric once in a while that I just fall in love with, and I have to have it, and it becomes my focus. And so this particular fabric, I love hydrangeas, and I like pinks and greens and purples together. So for me, I got excited over this fabric. So now I can take the fabric and I can go throughout the store and find character of print as well as the shades, the tints, the hues, all of that combined to make the quilt that I want to make, using this as my focus fabric. If you also look at the end of a bolt of fabric, it will have dots of color. All of those dots represent the colors that are found within that particular fabric. Use that as well to help guide you as you're choosing fabrics for your next quilt. I see beauty in this fabric now, and I'm excited about getting started on my quilt, and I'm ready to go. How about you?